Okay. Well, if Mark or Scott get rowdy, you can mute them, but everybody else, they're good to go. So. No, so we'll get started, and this is our strike team / incident response. Just so you know, this is kind of apparently typical of all Zoom meetings. I'm going to be trying to do 2 of these at once, starting at about 10:30. So, but we did want to talk about incident response. I know we've got several people cammed up, and everybody's welcome to cam up. That's true fashion of how we operate. So, but I'll let each of us introduce ourselves. And we have myself, Randy Cress, strike team lead for probably the same region Mark's supposed to be in now.
Mark Seelenbacher, I'm the strike team lead for, I'm just strike team lead. I just kind of hang out now.
I'm Scott Clark. I'm the central strike team leader. I know where I am in the state.
I used to be Eastern, but I'm no longer in the eastern part of the state, so now I just kind of hang out. Go ahead, Randy.
Oh, I was going to say, and we've recently, so what, we started out, Chris Koltick started this, and we were responding to hurricanes, and then he and I were working with it, and then it turned into bringing on 3 individuals to do the match the EM model. We quickly realized in different responses that we were burning ourselves out. So, since we're doing strike team first, we'll go ahead and introduce our 2, and I don't think Ted's in, but Chad, then Rob, if y'all want to introduce.
Sure. Rob Hudson, IT Infrastructure Manager, City of Greenville.
Chad Coble, IT Director, Stanley County.
All righty. So, and then Ted Norris is with Onslow County, and he couldn't be on today. So we expanded out kind of some of our very initial response that we have, and also want to make sure, Tom, introduce yourself.
Sure. Hey, good morning, all. I'm Tom McGrath. I'm with North Carolina Emergency Management and help kind of coordinate incident response with the NCLGISA strike team, the National Guard, Department of Information Technology, and other partners depending upon the incident. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. And Captain Smith, or was it Major Captain? I'm sorry. I'll let you introduce yourself. We can't see you, and you can explain why.
You never look better.
Well, none of the government laptops they issue us have webcams, so there you go. But I'm Captain Stephen Schmidt with the North Carolina National Guard, and I stay on top of current operations for our cybersecurity response force.
You mean they don't believe in black tape?
We used to use tape.
Captain Schmidt, what is the name of your division again? You're a joint task force or something like that?
Yeah, so it's called the CSURF or SURF, however you want to say it, but it stands for Cybersecurity Response Force.
All right, thank you. So just to kind of kick things off, we wanted to discuss, we've talked about, in the past, we've talked about prevention and things like that, and it's been done to death. But what we'd like to talk about are things that in the event of an incident, what can you expect from a response, and kind of how the process kicks off and how we all get involved. And the typical response for most of the cyber incidents that we responded to, we're focusing on cyber right now, it's kind of gotten through to us via word of mouth, but ultimately it all kicks off with Tom McGrath. The word gets up to the Fusion Center in Raleigh, and Tom coordinates everything from there. So Tom, if you would take it away there.
Sure, thanks, Mark. So I'd say the typical reporting is there is no such thing. I think every incident came in differently. Someone knows Mark or Randy or one of the other strike team guys, and they'll get the word out to me. Sometimes it comes through Department of Information Technology, sometimes directly to me. What we'd like to do is, and any way you can get it to us, it's fine. What we'd like to do is go ahead and if people can contact the North Carolina Emergency Management 24-hour Ops Center direct, and you could do that through your local emergency manager. They can do that. We can get the word that way, and we'll start the ball rolling there. But any way you get it to us is fine. And what we try to do at that point is talk to the person who's been, or the organization that's been compromised, say it's ransomware, and try to find out what the status is, and then we'll get a call together, and usually within a couple hours, is really as soon as the victim has got their legs under them, they can speak with us, and we'll get the experts from the strike team on the call. We'll get the National Guard team on the call. We'll get DIT on the call, and we'll go ahead and try to figure out what the game plan is, what the best response will be. If there's a criminal element, which like ransomware there is, we'll contact the FBI and we'll get them involved right away. They'll be on that first call as well. Sometimes DHS, CISA folks, they usually can provide support downstream, so they may not be on that initial call, but that's part of our team as well. But the first boots on the ground you're going to see in one of these responses is going to be from the National Guard. We have one of the members of the cyber EM team is on the CSERF, as am I. I have a desk over there, and he'll respond as well with the National Guard team. So maybe Captain Schmidt leads the team, and maybe he'd be good to pick it up from here.
Yeah, that's a great segue, Tom. So, like he mentioned, usually we'll put on a conference call with federal, state, and other partners, and we'll sit down, discuss, and start scoping out the situation. And about halfway through the discussion, we'll be asking questions, and eventually, we'll start asking, what do you need? And, from a National Guard standpoint, we'll start offering, at least from the onset, to send 2 people on site to be there with you, to get everything under control and to start implementing incident management. From there, once we start to understand the ground truth of whatever the situation is, that's when we'll start to determine gaps in capabilities and coordinating resources, making recommendations to CIO or county manager, whoever's in charge, for next steps and how the state can best support your government. Now, NCLGISA, the strike team, is also on the ground, and we work pretty closely with them. Like Tom had mentioned, we also have emergency management, some DIT folks, so it's a pretty robust operation. I'm going to kick it over to the strike team, and now we're just in that initial response, so I just want to give y'all the floor.
So so we're talking about how people get notified, the initial scoping call and things like that. Typically, what we've seen historically with an event is that boots on the ground can be on site within 12 to 24 hours of reporting it. Sometimes sooner, and depending on once how it's reported and how the information trickles down. Sometimes I don't think it's taken longer than that. Tom can verify that, but I think we are a pretty rapid response to that. And the initial scoping is determined when an incident happens, and we're specifically speaking about ransomware incidents now. It's from what we've seen to the organizations that it happened to, it's kind of a gut punch. They're blindsided and they're just kind of running around like chickens with their heads cut off. So The initial scoping call is a chance to really take a step back, you know, take a breather, catch your breath, and really identify what those needs are, what resources are going to be needed in the short term, in the long term, what the initial impact is. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit later is what would be helpful for the strike team, National Guard, the Fusion Center, for you all to do as preparation for an event like this. Because there's a lot. There's documentation, there's services, there's you know, when I say services, I mean a catalog of services that you guys have that may be impacted, departments that are impacted, things of that nature. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to pass it off to Scott now because he's got a lot more information than I do on this stuff. Since he's usually historically he's been one of the first strike team members on site.
Yeah, I draw the short straw every time for some reason. Yeah, when initially, you know, organization gets hit by ransomware, you know, as IT people, we want to get our users back up as soon as possible. But you know, the actual true incident response to something like that is to actually wait and assess the situation. Because if you start restoring machines, you're basically just reinfecting those machines once they come online. Because a lot of ransomware, a lot of malware is sitting out there waiting for other or fresh victims on the network to infect. So, you know, the thing to do is, you know, get your management to understand that we just can't, you know, restore. First off, you got to make sure your backups are. That's a whole nother process to make sure they're, you know, not compromised. But is to sit back, say, okay, you know, basically cut your, you know, mitigate the spread of the ransomware throughout your network. So that would be cutting your cross connects and whatnot initially, and then of course making the call to you know, to either one of the strike team members or our main strike team line, the emergency management, you know, 24/7 hotline. That way you can start engaging the resources. So like Tom said and Steve said, you know, or Captain Schmidt said, once you get the information to Tom takes it and coordinates all the different resources. So there is a ton of resources that a municipality can utilize once those resources are engaged. And usually we're all on the call and we figure out who needs the help. And you know, sometimes strike team gets there first. Sometimes the guard is just whoever can get there at the beginning to kind of, as soon as possible, help start the recovery process. But the recovery process is not it's not a really quick fix. It is very, to do it correctly, you have to sit there and you have to plan, you have to assess actually what the situation is. The guard is really great at threat hunting, so they'll understand what happened and how it happened. And usually strike team is starting to focus on, you know, the guard really good at threat hunting. We let them do the threat hunting and we start coordinating with the, you know, the local IT staff there to kind of help starting the restore process and getting a plan together. I think Rob can probably talk to this. I'm gonna hand it off to Rob in just a second, but Rob can probably talk to the planning process is crucial in a recovery process.
Yeah, Rob has the unique position of being not only a strike team responder, but he also went through an incident in Greenville last year, or was it the year before now? I can't remember. It's all blurred.
It was April 10th, a year ago. That date will be indelibly etched in my mind. What I can say is we notified the strike team about 5 o'clock in the morning and Tom had a conference call set up for us by 8:30 that day to talk with everybody at emergency management, DIT, and everything else. One of the other things I'd like to say is that if you have cyber insurance, as Mark said a while ago, everybody wants to get everything up first. The first thing you're going to go through is what they call a discovery process. And they're going to want to know what happened. And in many cases, until they're certain that no data was exfiltrated, you're not going to be able to do a lot as far as recovery goes. So we took that time during that time period when they kind of had us on hold to figure out what order we were going to restore things to, what was important. We took the scorched earth policy because we were able to verify our backups were good within the first 12 hours, I think. But we were 8 days before our cybersecurity insurance people would allow us to begin a full recovery process to start bringing production servers online. That's very hard to do for your staff because they're chomping at the bit. They want their end users back up. It's very valuable time for everybody. Like Scott said, take a breath, figure out what your process is going to be to get back in implementation mode so that you can recover. We didn't think we were doing things right, but at the hot wash afterwards, Mark and Randy and Scott told us, well, it looks like you guys had a pretty good plan put together to do your recovery. And we had a lot of support from our city manager and our city council members. That's big. Keeping a good relationship with those guys always works well, and keeping them informed. We did keep a lid on a lot of information so things wouldn't get out. And I think that was crucial. We got a couple of false Facebook probes trying to ask us about what was going on, and we didn't respond to them.
Yeah, I would say that would be one of the critical things, is also controlling the information or misinformation that is users talk. We all know this, and also the public talks. But you need to have a coordinated communication plan for this, so the right information gets out. So you don't institute people getting worried when they shouldn't be, because at the beginning you don't really know what. I mean, you may think you know what happened, but honestly, as you start peeling the layers on the onion back, then you actually find out what your payloads were and what it actually did. And just for the news to be reporting that you're hit by ransomware, everybody thinks the worst. All my information is stolen. Well, it was actually information that went out. That takes time, and that's what the Guard is really good at in finding out, if it can be found out. Sometimes ransomware covers their tracks pretty good. So, but anyway, so Mark.
Sorry, I just want to jump in. In terms of the getting information out, I want to turn this back over to Tom, because one of the resources that he brings to bear is the FBI, and they have PIOs available to craft that statement. So, Tom, can you speak a little about that?
Yeah, sure. That's a great segue. The FBI, so they're part of the team, and they do offer assistance in crafting that statement. I mean, Rob made a real good point. Number one, having backups and have them not connected to your network so they don't get encrypted, which we've seen happen many times. So that, number one. Number two, he was talking about having a good plan. And at the time it happens, it is like you get punched right in the nose and you're seeing stars. So to have that plan ahead of time, and review it and practice getting the backups back online, just things like that, but including your legal office, your legal counsel, your city manager, your county commissioners, whatever, that they're ahead of time. They know, hey, this is the message we're going to send out. If this happens, when it happens, we're going to have the people will know, right? Your sites, everything will go down. So then people are going to start scrambling, wondering what happened. So you need to have a message, and I agree with Rob that you don't want to have give out too many details, but you want to give out something. And the FBI will help your your public information officer, craft that statement so that it answers the questions the public has, but doesn't give up too much information. And another thing, just while we're on the FBI, the other thing they bring to the table, I mean, their goal is to find the bad guy, right? They're not incident recovery. That incident response. That's the National Guard. That's the team. NCLGISA strike team. That's all of us. But they're trying to catch the bad guy. But one of the things they do have is offices that specialize in specific variants of malware. So even though the attack happened here in North Carolina, the victims in North Carolina, there may be an office, Honolulu or Anchorage or somewhere else that may be the specialist in that variant. So they can then say, okay, hey, in the past victims we've seen, these are other things to look for. So that could get funneled back for the guard team and for your team to start looking for those type of additional malwares, additional vectors of compromise, that sort of vectors of how the whole thing happened. So that is, they bring that to the table as well. So having that statement, having this discussion before something bad happens is really important. So I recommend that. And then Scott or Mark were talking about us, the team, someone getting there on the ground. And we had one case where there was a municipality that Captain Schmidt ended up knocking on the door while we're having the scoping call because he just so happened to be out in that territory. So that's how quick it can happen. But it happened pretty quick. Now, it won't always happen that quickly, but it was very funny. He was able to do the scoping call from the victim site. So anyhow, I'll leave it at that.
What I'd like to move on to from that as a segue is to talk about the National Guard's role in part of the response and recovery effort is crucial and is threat hunting. And I'd like Captain Schmidt, if you would go into what's involved with that threat hunting process.
Right. So I'm going to expand on threat hunting, and there's a couple other skill sets that we bring to the table. The FBI does forensics, but we can also provide that service. Forensics, log analysis, malware analysis, pretty much anything on the forensic side that's going to answer the difficult questions. What was the initial entry point? Which system is patient 0? Was there data exfiltration? These are all going to be big questions that go into the decision-making process for the CIO and county and city managers alike. So really, in our response, it usually takes anywhere from 5 days to go through. This is going to be one of the lessons learned for how to best prepare for next time. But having the logs ready, having systems still powered on, leave them on, unplug the network, but there's vital information in RAM. So I definitely encourage everyone listening to take a look at how you're logging on your systems, on your IDS, IPS. We'd love to look at the firewall, any network devices, just so we could do some network correlation. But more often than not, we're going to use the information that's available on site to triage the situation and help explain what happened. Yeah, so I'll cut it there. That's sort of our role in the initial response, and I think that's the most value that we can bring to the table.
And that's going to segue nicely into what from a responder standpoint, what we kind of would like to see when we go on site. Asset inventory, data flows, things like that. So in terms of a security policy or response policy, what we ask for during the scoping calls, make sure if you don't have your network documented, try and get something for us. Whether it's your IP address scheme, your logical and physical network mapping, what systems are compromised, where are they located, how are they located, are they virtual, physical servers that you're talking about? Because if they're most of us are using virtual environments for our server infrastructure. So what the FBI is going to want in terms of their forensic analysis are the VMPKs of your domain controllers primarily. And again, I'd like to defer to Scott on this because he's done those initial responses. He's been boots on the ground day one more often than any other of the strike team members?
Yeah, so to follow up on that, I mean, one of the big things with all the whatever documentation you can provide now before you have an incident, it's not, and it's for all of us, it's not if we're going to be a victim of ransomware or some of these events. It's honestly when. We can all do our best, what we can to kind of mitigate that, but everyone will take their turn sooner or later. But so if you can get that documentation now, because when you're in a heightened state of, oh my God, I got this, my entire network is, has ransomware on it. You're not thinking, you need something you can quickly refer back to say, okay, here's our documentation, because, the guard will be coming in, strike team will be coming in and asking all these questions. And a lot of times we get, I can't remember, because they're so worried about the response. Or, over years, as our networks grow out, we build and we put layers upon layers of things, and I am guilty of this in my own shop. Is documentation is the last thing we're thinking about when we're turning up a new building, and we don't document. So taking the time and documenting that now will help out the response. But also during a response like this, and I know for myself, it's good to have who is in charge of the operation. Is it the CIO? Is it the IT director? Is it your network operations person? Who is going to be in charge of the response? Who not just fixing it, but who is in charge of all the resources? Like in Greenville, Rex was there as the CIO, but Rob was pretty much in charge of the restoration effort, I think, and it was great to have a single point of contact when operationally during the recovery process we had someone to go to. But have that one person to go to, and then establish your operational period. It just kind of towards the EM model. But you need to say, okay, we're going to work from 7 to 7, 8 to 8. Are we going to work in 24-hour shifts? But here's the thing: if you do 24-hour shifts, you've got to have the staff to do that. Staff need to be rested. They think better. They perform better when they're, and also the tempers do not flare as much when people are well rested. So that's, I mean, you have to take the human element into account, but also the technical element into it. And then, when we get on site, and when the guards get on site, it's 1 or 2 people that are going to be there. And then we will assess the situation and call in those people. Like if we know there's a big network rebuild, we'll call Ted. Where's Ted? He was just popped on. Ted usually gets the call when we're having a big network rebuild. And we've called Bryson when we've had to have machines rebuilt and do imaging, and Mark and Randy and myself. What we try to do is we try to all 3 not be on site at the same time unless, it's an overlap day, just because we try to keep the IT strike team leadership. And then we have a second level of kind of second level leadership to kind of help us extend our deployments. But that way we're well rested, but also we're the ones that can actually help call in other resources and coordinate. So usually if I'm on site, Mark and or Randy will be not on site, but on the back end. They'll be coordinating other resources to get involved. Other people will be calling those people up and putting the call out to our list and say, okay, who can help? And we have tried to establish, people that specialize in virtualization, VMware, and Hyper-V, other virtualization platforms. We have people that specialize in networks, so we'll call those resources up when we get on site and know what we're dealing with. A lot of times in these ransomware deployments, there has been a network rebuild. I would think probably about 75% of the time, in some form or fashion, we have done a network rebuild where we've added additional layers, additional VLANs to kind of help segment the traffic. And that's something, as you're looking at your network now, is if it's segmented but not segmented to the point where you have data, voice, Wi-Fi, other printer VLANs, all this stuff. Now's a good time to be thinking about that things, because that does help mitigate the spread, but also you can keep some services up when some services if you got to shut your data VLANs down, maybe you can keep your phones up. So, but I see Rob's unmuted. Maybe he wants to talk a little bit about that. No, nope. But it's having the single point of contact, or having a person that we know is going to be in charge. And I like to, sometimes when we're one of the first people on site, I like to have conversations with the leadership of the organization to let them understand that, your IT people are going to be stressed out. You got to give them, you got to keep the users, you got to keep the directors of the department, you got to keep those users away from the IT people so we can work. There needs to be a buffer. So like if you have a CIO that can interface and do that and keep the other staff working. But also the leadership needs to understand that we can't just sit there and restore. We can't just sit there and restore and be back up in 48 hours. If you do that, you're going to be restoring and restoring and restoring. So, and we need to understand what happened. And it's not a quick process. No matter how much we try it. Do what?
It's all about setting and managing expectations from the get-go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And hopefully you have good leadership in your organization that can tell that to the other departments. Having that, we've been in a couple of restoration where other departments started doing their own thing, and it actually it has hindered the restoration efforts. And because they don't understand that laptop touched the network 2 weeks ago and it may be infected. So let's just put that on. They don't understand that I can't bring a home computer because it's a web interface. I can't bring a home computer to start working. They need to understand that, the resources that are on the ground from the IT staff there, from the guard, from the strike team, we're talking from experience. And, it's one of those things where take a breath, let us figure out what happened, then we can start the restoration process. So.
I think too, one thing if I could add here, Captain Schmidt had spoken earlier about the hard skills sets that they bring to the table, which is absolutely true, and it's a huge value add. But I think something else they bring to the table, along with the strike team, is just an air of confidence and calm. Those skill sets, and those guys are so professional at what they do. Just having that presence in the room and having those folks in the room to be able to talk to, like I said, is a huge, huge comfort level. And I think that's super important because, I think the proposition of these outside teams and people coming in is a scary one to some folks, because you feel like they're going to come in and they're going to see the things I didn't do, or the things I forgot to do, or the things I meant to do. And, don't worry about that at all, because these guys, none of these guys are ever going to come in and judge anything you ever did, or even speak to you in a manner that seems judgmental or condescending. These guys are so professional, and it just really, in the deployments that I've been on, it is so heartening to see how these guys operate, how professional they are. Captain Schmidt himself, the lead of that team, is one of the most even-keeled guys I've ever met, and he is perfect for what he does. So it is a pleasant experience, if you could even say that, in that type of situation. But I think that's important that this team, the type of people that are on this team, behave and operate that way, because you need it in those types of situations.
Yeah, I would say to follow up on Chad, what he was saying is, we understand this is one of the most stressful times for an organization, but also an IT department, because quite frankly, the IT department is, everybody else is going, well, how did you not prevent this? And the uneducated person or people are saying that because they don't understand. And we all understand that all of us have resource constraints. Money is not unlimited. So we could really build a secure network. Actually, you can have a secure network if it's not plugged up to the internet, and you didn't have users. But guess what? We have to be connected to the internet, and we have to have users. But so we understand that this is a high stress time, and that's why you'll hear, hopefully you won't have to see us in an instant. But when we do, it's all about, let's take a breath, let's figure out, let's understand. We're all about understanding the issue and the problem. And not to say, well, you should have did this. We will always give, when we start the restoration process, we will always give recommendations. It's up to you to accept those and say, hey, yes, I want to do those. And there may be some things we don't understand on the political aspect, that we can't do certain things on the network because of the way the political landscape is between the departments and the elected officials. And we'll try to weed through all that. That's actually the strike team leader that's on the ground there is usually the one that deals with a lot of the, not the fun stuff where you actually go digging into a network and start building a network and look at logs and stuff. It's dealing with that aspect. So that's actually what I end up having to deal with sometimes when I'm drawing the short straw. Next time it's Mark's turn. So, but
yeah, and I'm looking forward to that one. Go ahead, Tom.
I just wanted to jump in and agree with what Chad was saying there as far as the guard and the strike team. You know, you're on the ground there, and Scott had mentioned that, you know, that you own the network. The guard is not going to tell you what to do. They will make recommendations, and it's up to you to do it. They'll point out, provide as many resources as we can to help you fix your network. And if there's data that's been exfiltrated and it needs to be reported to DHHS, for instance, we've had cases like that. I mean, it's still, that'll be pointed out and it'll be clear, but it's still the responsibility of the county or city to make that, you know, we can facilitate that, but you know, you're still driving the ship there. Another thing I wanted to bring up, I wrote down a couple things as we're talking here. Sometimes there's other vendors that you may have. If you're a school system, MCNC, for instance, you know, they're involved. You know, we work well with vendors as well. We're not in there to take over their cut of the piece of the action. You know, you have agreements with them, and we work well with them. The other thing we can bring, the state has some contracts that can be leveraged by cities and counties, and in probably all or most cases where the Department of Information Technology has actually funded an appliance, an intrusion prevention system appliance called an iSensor. It's part of one of their contracted vendors, and you know, that'll help put that in front of your firewall or behind your firewall, and that'll help you see what traffic is trying to get out. If there's maybe something still on there, just give you a warm feeling that you've got it once you do get everything back up, and it does take a while. But that, and there's another endpoint solution they have that is a kind of looks for threats on the endpoints there. That's another thing, you know, and DIT has funded all those things, and it's been a help to a number of places that have fallen victim. And the other thing I want to mention was and Captain Schmidt could talk more at length about this, but the National Guard has a mission to go out to the counties to do assessments if the counties want them. And it's a kind of an assessment. This is ahead of time. This is, and it could be used as, it's only shared with the county. There's an agreement ahead of time, and that could be used to help educate and use as leverage to get additional funding, because we know that when these things happen, you're working as hard as you can with whatever you have, and you're not getting what you need. But maybe that report can be used as leverage to help fix some of the things ahead of time, get the money to fix some of the things ahead of time. So I'll toss it over to Captain Schmidt to maybe expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So I'll talk about the security assessment that we do, and then I'll hop back over to the incident response. But we do provide a security assessment. It's pretty holistic. It's based off the NIST 800-53 framework. But basically what we'll do is provide vulnerability scans. We'll run scans on your network devices, as well as run through security technical implementation guidelines, STIGs, and they're very similar to CIS controls if you're familiar with that. And we'll also do a Q&A session, hire a bird's eye view questionnaire with the CIO, just to get an idea of where the cybersecurity program is. There's a couple ways to go about requesting it. It can go through the emergency management channels, or we have an email address that we can share after this. But hopping back over to incident response, you know, one of the things, I think we mentioned the Big Brother government concepts. You know, that's not what the North Carolina National Guard's about. You know, I think everyone is familiar with hurricanes. We've had quite a few big ones, but just like hurricane responses, you know, we're there to help the state of North Carolina recover. You know, we talked about a couple of things. So using the hurricane, for example, I think most organizations have a continuity of operations plan. And a lot of the things that we hit on in the past 30 minutes or so are things that should go into an incident response plan, identifying critical assets, identifying critical people, who's going to manage the incident, who do I need to call, what phone numbers, do I have a phone number for my ISP, do I have the State Fusion Center's phone number? You know, what steps are we going to take when we get hit with ransomware or a business email compromise? You know, I've got some templates that I can share with the group afterwards. But with that, I'm running out of steam here. So who's the next victim?
I'll take over real quick. There were a couple of questions in the chat about a checklist, a pre-event assessment checklist, or you know, the sorts of things that they're looking for. And Steve did respond back that he would provide an EM checklist that they have. This is also something that we on the strike team have been kind of working on when we have time. The other question was from Earl. What software would you recommend for logging, centralized log management, retention? As Chad said, we're similar to Chad. We use Splunk for logging or searching logs and things like that. The key, though, that we've discovered is that nothing loosens purse strings faster than an incident like this. Every county manager, city manager, board of commissioners, town council, whatever, they'll say, what's it going to take? You know, you have your cyber insurance. How much is it going to take so we can start working tomorrow? That's not the problem. The problem is that what we've discovered is that in most places that we've responded to, the tools are already in place, but they're just not fully implemented. If you have an endpoint security platform or an umbrella of security suite, how much of it is implemented? Is it 100%? Are you you have to approach your security as a layer, and I didn't really want to get into this because it's more on the prevention side, but the key there is that you can't just throw money at a problem like this. It's one of those things where you just have to really look at the tools that you have at your disposal already, and make sure that if you need the additional training on those tools, or you need to spend time working on the implementation, fully implementing those tools, that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, as it were. Scott, can you jump in on that one?
Yeah. So, and to kind of dovetail on that is, you know, now when you're not in an incident is now the time to do this, is to go through, and this is more a little bit on the prevention side, but you know, to go through that and know what settings are on your endpoint security, know what settings are on your firewall, have that documented, because that's what we're going to be asking for in the incident response is, okay, what's your endpoint security? What's your firewall? Okay, can we get a look at the firewall rules? Having a current backup of your firewall configs, you know, in some form that we can get to. And one good thing is keep that not on your central file server. Keep that somewhere else. You know, utilize cloud storage, secure cloud storage to that is not synced, that you manually upload to, to keep those records safe, because as our networks get faster and faster, these ransomware and the malware spreads through networks faster than you can blink your eye. And that one good thing, and Tom alluded to, is look at your backup strategy. Backups can save the day. Get your data back. We're going to recommend, most likely all the time, recommend the scorched earth policy, which means nuke all your machines, re-image them, build from a fresh image. We're working on hopefully getting an image so that you don't have to sit there for 8 hours and download Windows updates. But we're trying to improve the restoration process with that, and something we can apply your Windows licensing to. But look at your backups. If your backups are in the same facility, same layer 2 network, same layer 3 network, on a Windows device, see if you make sure you get that data somewhere else. If you have Linux devices, and make sure they're patched, make sure they have the latest security updates, because Linux is a more, in my mind, I'm a Linux guy, but it's a little more secure than Windows, but it does have vulnerabilities out there, and we unfortunately seen where that can be exploited. But also look at your backup strategy. You can never have too many backups, and I know backups, it costs money, but and that's not something that your management may be going, well, that's what I like to call, it's not really a sexy thing until you have an incident response and you go, oh, my backups were good. But if you have your data stored on a Linux appliance, but you have a Windows VM that is actually managing it, have a backup plan for that. Have a way to recover that. Have your configs. I mean, if Veeam and all these other software applications, a lot of them run on Windows, but make sure you have that data somewhere else and you can rebuild the catalogs really good, really fast, and have them and utilize. And cloud storage is one of those things where let's just put everything in OneDrive, or let's just put everything in Google and call it a day. Well, remember, if you are syncing, files to OneDrive, when it goes to encrypt those files, it's syncing them up. So, and Microsoft does have a way to recover OneDrive. So does Google does too, but it's all or nothing, or it's not as in a time frame that you would like. Look at if you're Office 365 or Google, look at all third-party backup solutions. Anything you can do to separate your data and your config files so it's not living on the network that could be at risk is something that would help you out. That way your information and your data can be recovered, and that's one thing we're going to be asking for. I know this is getting more into prevention, but these are things that kind of do now before you have an incident. So when we come, to help you, your config files and your data will be there. So I see Captain Schmidt's unmuted. You want to take it away?
Yeah, I was just going to add one more tidbit to the backups, because it is a question that comes up during incident response. Hey, I have these backups. Are they good? Are they clean? Can we go back to them? Now, it's just statistically, adversaries are going to be on the network for at least 30 days. So if your backups aren't going back that far, then I would look very closely at your backup strategy, because that's something we run into where, hey, we have backups 2 days prior to the event and we think they're clean. Well, I guarantee you there's going to be at least a couple systems that aren't.
We've been talking quite a bit here, and we have about 11 minutes left in the session, but we wanted to do this as a Zoom meeting instead of a Zoom webinar because we wanted more interaction. So feel free to jump in at any point now and let us know what your experiences are, and what you've implemented successfully, what you think wasn't as successful, and things like that. So please feel free to jump in and join the discussion. There's a lot of good discussion going on in the chat right now, talking about backups and the assessments that the National Guard's doing.
One thing I'd like to add to the backup conversation, I think sometimes we think we have to have a sophisticated solution, and we do need to have a primary solution, but we also need to have a secondary and a tertiary. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be something bought off the shelf or whatever. One thing that I've noticed in the deployments that we went out to is almost always, as either Scott or Mark was saying, it's going to be a scorched earth situation. You're going to want to completely clean those servers and start from scratch. And hopefully you can do that and fall back to a backup, but you might not be able to. We've seen that situation happen more times than one. Something that I've started here in Stanley, especially in my 911 environment, is to go ahead and pre-build my alternate Active Directory environment so that when, if I do have an incident and we have to go through and re-image these machines, we're just going to re-image them over to that AD environment and go ahead and get back up and going a little bit more quickly, if that is a route that we decide to take. But it is another route and another option.
Hey, Mark, I just want to jump in here on something. You had mentioned a couple times the Fusion Center, and I don't know how many folks are familiar with that, but they were, so that our cyber unit, emergency management cyber unit, sits in the State Fusion Center. It is, Fusion Centers were created after 9/11, focused on terrorism, sharing information. There are about 80 Fusion Centers around the country. And then they've kind of transitioned to all different crimes. But it really was only back in 2018 where the North Carolina Fusion Center ended up building this cyber unit, or starting the cyber unit. And as far as sharing information, so in these cases, the National Guard team will do analysis and they'll come up with some indicators of compromise, and they'll funnel them to the Fusion Center, to me, and we'll anonymize that stuff so it won't be tied back to your organization. And we coordinate this with you so you're satisfied. And that we push that back out to the members. You've seen probably some of my documents. Hopefully they've been helpful as far as some indicators of compromise. And they also go up to MSISAC and they'll get pushed out through MSISAC as well. But just in case there's a targeting of North Carolina governments, we like to get that out specifically to you. And again, it's anonymized, and that's what the Fusion Center does. It shares information about drugs, gangs, human trafficking, and cyber. So whatever. So that's kind of where the Fusion Center fits into this. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so there are, I hope one of the things that you're getting from this session is that there are a ton of resources available to you to help you respond and recover from an incident like this. From the Fed all the way on down to locals. So really the goal here is kind of to make you aware, build that awareness, and really kind of give you an idea of the sorts of information that we're going to be looking for from a response perspective. I would like to ask any of the other strike team members who responded, because there's quite a few on the line. I know Ted's been quiet over there. I noticed his Ted, microphone. Ted, you're muted.
There we go. So I got a couple of things to say, and the guys may not like this, but I'll say that a lot of times the technical side of the incident response is the easy part, and the political side is the hard part. And I think like Mark, Scott, and Randy kind of have a unique skill set in that they're really, really great technical resources, but they're also CIOs. So they know how to handle the political side of things. So they can really, really help on that thing. I'll say as well, I think it's really important, I apologize if somebody's already talked about this, to do incident response exercises, and make sure you include your admin staff, maybe even your commissioners, so they understand what kind of like impact these types of incidents can create. And I think that can possibly help them understand if it actually does happen, how it's going to be, because it's for us, this is like the worst day of our lives if this happens to our network. So I think that's really important. The second thing I wanted to talk about real quick, and I hope Rob is still on, but you know, one of the hard things that I've seen from responding to these incidents is making sure you get good advice. And I know at Greenville's location, you know, they were getting some different opinions specifically from their cyber insurance guys. So I don't know if Rob can talk about that real quick, but make sure, I think, again, Rob, Randy, and Scott, you know, are going to have your best interest, or I'm sorry, Mark, Randy, and Scott are going to have your your best interests at heart. And, you know, we're, you know, NCLGISA strike team, you know, we're your friends, you know, during this kind of situation. So we're going to try to give you the best advice possible. But, you know, like I said, we've been in situations where consultants maybe were advising folks not exactly the way we would hope they would. So anyway, that's what I got to say.
Yeah, I'll talk about the cyber insurance a little bit. Just be careful with, everybody thinks cyber insurance is the golden bullet. Their job is to get you back the way you were before, not to improve you in any shape, form, fashion, but to get you back up and functioning and determine whether there was data loss or not. So they're going to try, that's their premise. That's why we waited 8 days before we could come back up again. We got some good advice from strike team guys, some of our other vendors. The other thing to think about is, you know, everybody now does everything remote. If you're trying to do a recovery and you're trying to get vendors to help you, I only had 4 technical staff on our team. So, you know, the guy that did my firewall was also the guy that did part of my VMware infrastructure and some other things. He can't talk to 3 or 4 vendors remotely at a time and keep them straight. So we actually had to pull vendors in. And I know other incidents where it was the same situation. Some things you can do remote, some things you can't do remote. You kind of got to think about those when you're starting to peel the layers of the onion off. What's the most critical, what to build. I know in the past we've seen some recoveries where vendors got involved, and it was really, the vendors were more concerned about how they could make money off of it versus really giving good advice and seeing what product would fit for them best to sell. So remember, you still have to be your own advocate. You know why you built your network and your environment that way. There may be a better way to do it. I used to always tell my guys, sometimes we're not dumb. We may be ignorant because we don't know a better way, but we're dumb if we don't listen to a better way.
Right, and kind of wrap what Rob was saying is make sure that you know, during an incident response that you're driving the boat. You are the person. It is your network. At the end of the day, we're going to leave. The guard's going to leave, and the vendors are going to leave unless, you know, well, unless they're on contract. But you know, that's not their network. We try to leave you with a network that's better than it was before, and your security posture is better, while also helping you recover from the event. But we'll try to leave you better. Not all vendors have that interest at heart. They may say they do, but just make sure that the IT staff is driving the ship in the direction that the recovery process happens, and don't let the vendors drive the boat. So, Mark.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to mention for mainly for the counties out there, Tom had mentioned DHHS being a resource, and Rob mentioned data exfiltration. I just want what we've found out is that from a DHHS perspective, if your Department of Social Services is hit or your health department is hit, they are going to assume that data has been exfiltrated. They're going to pull the plug, and they will. The onus is on the county to prove that no data has been exfiltrated. So that is something that you need to keep in mind. All you county people need to keep in mind in an event. And I just wanted to throw that out there. But just as a final note here, final word, I just wanted to echo what Scott said, that we may come in, we may make recommendations, we may help the design, but ultimately, if we come into your shop, Glenn, that is nice. I like that. If we come into your shop, we're not going to do anything that you're not comfortable with. It's ultimately it's your network. You're going to have you have the ownership of it, and if there's something that's done, you're the ones going to have to support it. So we're not going to do anything that you're not comfortable with, and ultimately we're going to make you're going to make the decisions of what's okay to do and what's not. We're at 11:15. We'll hang around for a bit if anyone has any questions, but that's it. If anyone wants to hang out.
Tom, Steve, Captain Schmidt, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, thank you. So
Sure. I'll go first. It's going to be an echo to the echo. But my team's goal is to get you back online in a secure posture. That's it. We're not there to step on toes. We just want to get your government back online so that you can provide those critical services to citizens in North Carolina. That's all I'll add.
Thanks, Tom.
If I can, Mark.
Oh.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here today. You know, I echo everything you guys have said, and Captain Schmidt. So appreciate all you do. Thank you.
Glenn, you got something?
Yeah, I just want to encourage people to get involved and get engaged in Strike Team, especially if you're from a larger organization. You know, we have, you know, a team that's going out and they're doing a phenomenal job. But what we've seen is having members of our team engaged in this has helped our security posture immeasurably. Every time Ted gets deployed, he comes back and he's flipping switches and locking things down and changing things. And so you really get an opportunity to learn on somebody else's dime, as it were, and get that real world experience. So you get engaged in this. This is, it's really a worthy pursuit, and frankly, it's unique in the country.
So yeah, just as a final note to wrap up, thank you very much, Glenn, for that. If you do want to get involved, you can email itstriketeam@NCLGISA.org. That will go to me and Randy and Scott. But yeah, we're always looking for talent. We're looking for people who want to respond. And as Glenn said, this is some of the best training money can't buy.
Yep.
On that note, I want to thank you all for joining us. I hope you got something out of it. I know I did. Thank you all.
All right, thanks.